And somebody sent me a little email while you're just relaxing, that they were feeling a bit depressed, and they heard a radio show in the United States on which there was one of the writers of Saturday Night Live, which is supposed to be the biggest comedy series in the United States, Saturday Night Live. And one of the writers listened to my talks and solved all his problems too, or her problems. And so amazing, these talks actually go on Saturday Night Live. That's where they get all the jokes from. Maybe not. The standard is not that high here. Anyway. So live streaming goes a long, long way. So anyway, people are sitting down. Now the topic of the talk tonight is a serious one, but I can't be serious for too long, so I'm going to try. Because it is a common problem in our society, and people want to have it addressed. And it is of suicide. It's a serious topic, but don't get too upset about it, okay? Because if you get really too upset, then you might be the next one. So it exists in our world, and sometimes it is a problem which we have. And sometimes you ask, again, why do people do this? What happens to them? The first thing about the Buddhist attitude to suicide, it's not as bad as in some other religions, simply because Buddhists never conceive of life as being given by a god, as if it's like not your choice, that you have to live it out because it's not your choice to play God with your own life. In Buddhism we think, no, it is your karma, your choice, you do what you think you need to do. So there's no sort of going against some divine will by committing suicide. If in Buddhism we believe it's not a smart thing to do, it's a bit of a mistake in most situations, but at least you have another chance afterwards. It's one of the beautiful things about people who accept the idea that that life goes on after death. There's a reincarnation. And I keep on saying this, but look, the evidence is so strong that reincarnation is a fact. There are people even sitting here who remember their past lives, checked it out, it's real. So it's a beautiful idea that when a person dies, they make a mistake. And sometimes a person makes a mistake, it's just really awful if that is just the only chance you have. You make a mistake, you blow it big time. But if you have another opportunity, then it's not so harsh. And in life we're always allowed other opportunities, we make mistakes, but the point of the meaning of life is we make mistakes to learn from them, not to get punished from them. If we make mistakes, we have no opportunity to learn afterwards, it's just one life and that's it, you've blown it, then that is just very, very hard to stomach. It doesn't feel just, it doesn't feel right. The person, their whole existence is finished just because of one stupid act. The idea it goes on again afterwards is a much more comforting, and if you believe what I say is true, it's real, a person who does commit suicide, they have another try next time. And the whole purpose of our life is allowing mistakes to happen and not getting so upset when people do make mistakes. You've made mistakes, I've made mistakes, everybody makes mistakes in life. But the idea is actually to learn from them and to grow from them. That's the point of life. So even if it's a big mistake, that we do a silly act and we commit suicide, the whole point is not punishing yourself, not punishing your loved ones, but learning from it, to find some other way next time. So everything in life is an opportunity to learn. And so even if it's someone who's committed suicide, what can you learn from that? Number one, you can learn how easy it is to do in today's world, and why does it happen. Obviously it is depression. And what actually the depression is actually finding there's no meaning, there's no point to going on. You can understand that if it's a person who is at the end of their life, they may have some terminal diseases, and their form of suicide is a form of voluntary euthanasia. You can understand that, there's some sense behind it. But if it's like somebody, who's young, still, reasonably fit, still, got a lot of their life ahead of them, then of course it's not a very sensible thing to do. But why do people actually do that? It is so easy to get into a frame of mind where we get so depressed that we can't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And it's those situations where we think, well, what's the point? I might as well go on. If you want to know about the point of life, and I'll tell you how you can find out the point of life, because we have these acupuncture clinics here. You do some acupuncture. You soon get the point. But no. You find out the point of life. It is actually not just being inside yourself, because if you're inside yourself too much, you find out that you're not sort of relating to other people. You can just really go off the rails thinking. It's one of the reasons why that people come and learn, this great thing of meditation these days, what some people call mindfulness, because it gets aware of just the way your mind works. And you can actually see, if you're not skillful with the way you use your thoughts, with the way you relate to other people, you can just go into this really black hole. And once you get into that black hole, it's sometimes impossible to find the way out. That's why you do need good friends. And if you have a good friend, sometimes a good friend actually goes in the hole with you. They have to. To feel what you feel. But the good friend, I do that very often when a person gets really depressed and suicidal, and I have to talk with them. And you realize sometimes their life, is in your hands. And so you talk with them. But I try and feel what they feel, which means I have to climb into the hole with them. But whenever I climb into a hole, I always take a ladder with me, so I can get out and bring them out too. And that ladder is a bit of wisdom, a bit of kindness, and a bit of awareness. So you see exactly what you're doing. And you can always find another way of looking at life, instead of always looking at the bad part. And sometimes just being with a person. It's incredible just what happens when you just form a relationship with someone outside of yourself, because we do influence one another. And if you have a very positive, kind, beautiful person around you, it's so hard to get depressed. It's like the story which I wanted to bring up. I don't think I've told this for a long time. And the person, I don't think he would mind me telling this, because he used to be one of our caretakers here in this centre a long time ago. And he decided to retire and just went to live in one of the wheat belt towns by himself. But being by himself, not having many friends too far away from things, he started to get depressed. And instead of actually, calling up, a friend or calling me up or something and just having a discussion and sharing a few jokes, instead what he did, he decided that he'd had enough. He wanted to commit suicide. You know what he did? He was living in a caravan. He had a shed. He was going to build a house, but hadn't got around to it yet. So in his caravan, he actually went into the shed first of all, got the rope, tied it to a beam in the shed, tied the noose, and got the chair out just exactly right, made sure it was the right length and everything, and had everything prepared, and then went into the caravan to write his suicide note. And he was halfway through the suicide note. He had the radio on at the time in his caravan. And as he was writing the suicide note, who came on the radio? Ajahn Brahm. And he thought, oh no, I can't get away from this monk. And of course he just screwed up the suicide note, untied the rope, and he came and told us about it afterwards. Laughing his head off. He came very, very close. But sometimes just hearing me, just the sense of humour came up, and just why just do this? Because sometimes you get into these ruts of thoughts, which is so negative, and all that depression stuff is just a silly way of thinking. And you come to a place like this, and just learn how to train your thinking, so it never gets into that depression in the first place. How to get over that depression? There's, please excuse me, that when I teach many weeks in a row, I don't know what I taught last week, so please forgive me if I repeated this. But this was, I think I did do it 2 or 3 weeks ago, when I was teaching a meditation retreat a couple of years ago. There was one of the girls there, got really depressed. And you know why she got depressed? Because everybody was being happy, except her. And I was telling people, the beauty of meditation. And she got so fed up of having to be happy when she didn't feel like being happy. So she came up to me to complain. She said, "Why do you keep telling me to be happy? And why is everybody else happy in this retreat? It really makes me feel so miserable." So she thought, coming to a place like this, or coming to a meditation retreat, you have to be happy. Have you ever sort of felt like that? Everyone else is happy and I don't feel like being happy. Why should I be happy? And yet they put the pressure on you. And even apparently that some companies, I've seen this guy when I gave her a lecture over in Sydney some time ago. He was called the Chief Happiness Officer of his company. It's really weird what they do in Sydney. Oh, it's actually some people from Sydney here, I do apologise. But the chief, I said, look, why do people have to be happy? Who said, is that some new law which the government has actually enacted and they will fine you for being miserable? So sometimes that I realised that that was putting too much pressure on her. So what I did, I went into the office and I got on the computer, and very quickly, I'm pretty good at the computer these days, and I wrote her out a grumpy license. And it was on letterhead, it was really nicely done, nice font. And I said, this certificate gives, to this girl permission to be grumpy for any reason or no reason whatsoever for the rest of her life. Signed, Ajahn Brahm, her teacher. It was a grumpy license. And I've done many of those licenses before. Angry license, depressed license. I'll give you permission to be depressed. And as soon as I gave her that grumpy license, she looked at it and she laughed her head off, and that was the end of her grumpiness for a day or two. You can see what's happening over there. If somebody is depressed, I'll give you a depression license. Because why is it that we're not allowed to be depressed these days? And it's like stigmatized. It's wrong. You're bad. Come on, get out of it. Sometimes life is like that. Sometimes life can be so depressing. So, you allow yourself to be depressed. Okay, today's my depression day. Do they have World Depression Day? They had World Cancer Day a few days ago, because I gave a talk at the Cancer Wellness Association. And I thought, World Cancer Day means everyone can have cancer today. Because Red Nose Day means you have to wear a red nose. So, so Depression Day. One day when everyone can be depressed. Wouldn't that be amazing? What would that actually do? It'll take the stigma away from being depressed. You don't think there's something wrong with it. Because when you don't think there's something wrong with it, then actually depression becomes undermined. You can't get depressed when you're allowed to be depressed. In fact, sometimes, this is what one of my teachers did once. Someone said, it's on a slightly different topic, on anger. No, actually, depression is just anger with life and anger with yourself. They said, I always get angry. How can I overcome my anger? This teacher, Ajahn Chah, he's very innovative. He said, okay, next time you get angry, get out a clock, like one of these clocks I have up here, a little travelling clock. Put it in front of you and see how long you can be angry for. See if you can beat your record. And straight away, what it was actually doing, it was actually destigmatizing anger. And straight away, it's such a stupid thing to do. Put a clock out there and see how long you can be angry for. You can't be angry very long. And it's also using some very beautiful psychology. Is when you're angry, you're just thinking about the cause of the anger, the person or the thing, the event which you think triggered that anger. You're not actually thinking of the anger inside of yourself. You're thinking of, it's him, it's her, it's the government, it's the traffic light, whatever it was. But you're not actually being aware of what's happening inside. By timing your anger, you can actually find what it feels like inside. When you know what it feels like inside, when that mindfulness is inside rather than out there blaming somebody, it's so easy to fix. And what usually happens is you start laughing at anger. Same with depression. The cause of suicide. When we stigmatize it, negativity just builds and builds and builds. We get depressed. We get depressed about being depressed. We get angry at it, and it just fights it, and it gets worse and worse and worse. We get into a deeper and deeper, deeper hole. Now, there's a classic Buddhist story. Again, I've probably said this many times, but this is one of the best of the stories. And there are some psychologists, I forget who she was, quite a few of you, they said there's 4 of my stories which they use all the time. This is one of them, which really works. It's a story of the anger-eating monster. This brilliant story, this anger-eating monster, I'll tell it in full because some of you haven't heard it before. This monster came into a palace when the emperor was away. It was ugly. It was frightening. It was so disgusting to look at that all the people in the palace who were supposed to be guarding it, the security people, we've got security people out of here, but they're not ugly. They're actually, well, they're a bit frightening, but they're supposed to be frightening to keep the people away from your cars. They're good people, they're the good guys. But these security company, or whatever it was, trying to guard the palace, as soon as they saw this frightening demon, they just hid. They went under the tables. They climbed up the lampposts, anything to get away from this terrifying monster. Of course, that just allowed the monster to go wherever he wanted. Went right into the center of the palace, into the big hall, and sat on the emperor's throne. And the monster sitting on the emperor's throne, eventually the guards came out and said, "You've gone too far. That's our emperor's throne. You can't sit on that." Imagine a monster came in here before I came in and sat here. What would you do? We say, "Get out of here. That's Ajahn Brahm's place, or that's the nun's place. You can't sit up there. Get out." That's what they did. They got really angry at this monster. But the more angry they got at the monster, the bigger the monster became. And the more ugly, and the more frightening, and the more disgusting. And they were getting so angry at this monster for a long time. The monster kept on getting bigger and bigger and uglier and more stinky until the emperor came back. And the reason she was the emperor, you see, I'm sucking up to the female gender today because there's all the nuns up here and I'm a bit afraid they may kick me. The reason why she was the emperor, because she was the smartest. She exactly knew what to do in all these difficult situations. And when she saw this monster was gigantic. And so yucky and ugly and frightening and stinky. In fact, I made this up, that the smell coming off this monster was so bad, was so disgusting, that even the maggots crawling on the skin threw up. They barfed. Not even maggots could take the stench, and that's saying something. So that's actually quite good English. I like that one. That's original Ajahn Brahm. So I do borrow a bit from here, a bit from there, but that's original. So the reason why she was the empress was because she was smart. So when she saw this disgusting monster sitting in her chair, what did she do? She said, "Welcome, monster. Thank you for coming to visit me. Has anybody got you a cup of tea yet? We have Dhamma tea from Sri Lanka." So this talk is sponsored by, and I expect a donation, Mr. Dhamma. We have peppermint tea by Mr. Twining. We have herbal teas. I would like something to eat. Do you want a pizza? Because pizza you get monster size these days. And she wasn't joking. She really wanted to look after this monster. And everybody noticed that every kind word, kind deed or kind thought, the monster got a little bit smaller, less ugly, less smelly. They realized their mistake. So they started looking after the monster instead of trying to get rid of it, caring for it, welcoming it. And every kind act, kind word, or even kind thought, the monster kept on shrinking. until it was back to the size where it first came in. But they never stopped. They carried on until the monster was so tiny that one more little act of kindness and the monster vanished completely away. And the Buddha called that an anger-eating monster. You give it anger and it gets worse. It gets bigger, more of a problem. Instead you welcome it. Thank you, depression, for coming to visit me. Instead of trying to get rid of it. Because that depression, that negativity, is an anger-eating monster. And that's why it gets bigger. So when a person really gets depressed, sometimes they can't see it. And they get deeper and deeper as they try and fight their way out. Fighting is not the way to overcome depression. It's a low energy state. Just relax. I tell people my word is to milk it for everything it's worth. If you're depressed, you can ring up, say, I'm depressed today, I don't need to go to work. Imagine that Monday morning. You can actually stay in bed and tell your partner, I'm depressed today. And they'll give you extra TLC, really kind to you, make your favourite breakfast, and just put on your favourite music or whatever else, because they want to cheer you up. Sometimes, getting someone to look after you is very hard unless you're sick, so sometimes fake it. So by saying something like that, you see, you're changing an attitude towards these things. Instead of getting out of here, you don't belong. These feelings are part of life. As I was saying to someone earlier, we learn from these things. We understand them, we know them, and then they vanish. The other story I was telling somebody was, it's a very core Buddhist principle. And it's said in the Buddhist scriptures again and again and again. Now, there was like a being. It may be a mythical being, it may be just a metaphor. You can make of it what you like. But there was a being you will see in the history of Buddhism called Mara. And Mara is similar to a devil, but it's much more nuanced than that. And this Mara guy always comes along to try and disturb people and to cause trouble, a mischief maker. And the way this guy Mara is overcome is not by fighting or kicking or any violence. Even the Buddha, when Mara tried to stop him becoming enlightened, Buddha would just say, I know you, Mara. That's all, just understanding. And as soon as the monk, the nun, the lay person, or in this case the Buddha, said that, I know you, Mara, this guy Mara, oh, he knows me, and would droop his shoulders, lower his head, and just go away. It just the knowledge, the understanding, was the way to overcome the problems, not fighting. And that's the same with something like depression. To understand it, don't fight it, get to know it. And when you get to know it, you have power over it. It's so easy to notice that with a little bit of mindfulness, awareness of these emotions, these feelings like depression, what does it feel like? What actually is it? Don't try and get rid of it. Get to understand it and know it. That's mindfulness. And then you'll soon find that just like everything else, just like the hot weather, or the cold weather, or the rains, or even the fires, the bushfires, they burn themselves out eventually. They're impermanent, they don't last. Just hang in there. Because knowing they're not going to last is seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. It will go, it has to. No other possibility there. Just hang in there. If any of you are really depressed because you've lost a loved one, you're grief-stricken, and you don't know how I'm ever going to cope with this, look at other people who have been through that and even worse. They do grow from it. They do cope with it. Just like them, it's impermanent for you. The day will come when, you can laugh at what happened. And I mean that. And this is actually with the light at the end of the tunnel. When you get to know these emotions, you know they don't last. Which means you can bear with them. The worst part of torture is if you think it's going to go on forever, and there's no end to it. The worst part of grief is you think this is going to be eternal. It's not going to change at all. And the worst part of depression is you think it's got no end. So just to understand, everything does have that end to it. that is usually enough just to bear with it, and it disappears all by itself. And in fact, the less you fight, the quicker it disappears. The more you're kind, the quicker it goes. And not only that, it's great, because sometimes you miss these things when you're by yourself. One of the great, that I've been a monk for over 40 years now, Buddhist for ever since I was 16. So how old am I now? I've watched 48 years now being a Buddhist. But even though I was a Buddhist, I made a point of keeping close to my Christian friends. And other atheist friends as well. Because I realised what happens if you just hang around with the same people all the time. You just get narrow-minded. Especially in my position, I made sure, that I kept all those old friends who were atheists, who were scientists. Those friends, even now, making friends with especially the Anglicans in Perth, and also with the monks at New Norcia. We're really great friends still. And the reason I do this, because I just want to not to get so narrow-minded, not just be on a narrow track in my thinking. And that's actually what happens if you, keep by yourself too much. That you get so narrow-minded, you can get into those depressions, and there's no one around to pull you into line. Because I keep the Christians and the scientists and other people around, if I ever get too dogmatic or just too off the rails, they pull me back into line. And I respect them for that. Because sometimes, yourself, I'm just Buddhist. You can be in big trouble. I mean that. You can become the fundamentalist Buddhists. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that often, but there are signs of that happening in Sri Lanka and Burma. You know what I'm talking about over there. But when you actually meet with other people, associate with other people, and keep those relationships with other people, you find actually they do keep you from getting too extreme. And that's one of the things with depression. You're by yourself too much. Sometimes when people do get really negative and depressed, they just go and see the doctor and they're just giving some medication. And for a long time now, I've asked people, if you do really get negative, you get down, a much better medication than taking any chemicals, and I don't mean like extreme depression, but you're getting sort of really down, is for goodness sake go and do some voluntary service. Go out and just go to visit a hospital, visit an old people's home, or do voluntary service here, come to an old monk's home, this place, an old nun's home, Dhamma. Just because when you go out giving to others, it's incredible how powerful that is, to overcome any depression. Number one, you feel you have meaning in life. Other people are happy to see you. It's amazing. And if that doesn't work, what I said last week, get a dog or a cat. Or, some little animal. We had this rabbit in Jhana Grove the last week. This gorgeous little rabbit, and just give it a carrot and it just eats it really greedily, but it's great fun to watch. And little animals like that are just beautiful because they give you love. As I was saying last week, that this actually gives you meaning in life. And if you do some community service or get a dog or a cat, it's really hard, for you to get too depressed. You look at this little dog, and you really feel like killing yourself, and it comes up to you and just licks you all over. And how can you kill yourself now? So having a little animal around is very good. Or getting out and doing some community work. Now, when I was at university, it's a time that's sometimes so easy to get depressed when you're that age, even though you're very successful. But what I did, it was because I had a couple of friends, again, Christian friends, and they told me one day they were doing some voluntary work in this full-born hospital, for those people with mental problems, some emotional dysfunctions. And so they were going to do that because they thought, this is what Christians do. And that really, put me on the spot. And say, well, if the Christians can do it, the Buddhists can do it as well. So it just literally was keeping up with the Joneses because they were doing, oh God, I suppose I better go as well. So I decided to go as well. And it was working with people with Down syndrome. And that, I don't mind saying this, please excuse me, but the Buddhists won. my Christian friends 2 or 3 weeks, and they were out of there. And I went there for 2 years. Okay, first of all, it was just being a goody-goody and just showing the flag for Buddhism, and Buddhists can do as well as the Christians. It's like Fremantle Dockers and Eagles all over again, but with religion. And I used to tell people that I once thought of actually starting a soccer team, footy team. A Buddhist footy team. And we could play the Christians. But as soon as I decided that wouldn't work, because I started to think about it. If you started a Buddhist footy team and you played the Christians, or you played the Jews or the Muslims or whatever, we'd have to play by Buddhist principles. First of all, letting go. If the other team wanted the ball, here, take it. Compassion. Because if the Buddhist team scored a goal, that would really disappoint the opposition. So on purpose, you'd kick it so it missed the posts. Out of kindness, compassion. So if we did have a Buddhist team, we would always lose. So I think that's one of the reasons why the Fremantle Dockers lost because they had too many Buddhists in their side. But anyway, I did that, and I never actually did that. It was starting off obviously competition and ego and stuff, but after a while I really started to enjoy going to those, spending everything Thursday afternoon. And I actually rearranged tutorials and things so I could always make it for 2 years. And I got so much out of that. Number one, I did learn what we call like emotional intelligence from the Down syndrome kids. Because I know every time I went there, if I'd have just busted up with my girlfriend, they knew straight away. I didn't need to tell them. They'd pick it up. And they would just come and give me this big hug. Say, what's wrong? And, because I just busted up with a girlfriend or something. They were incredibly emotionally sensitive. And that actually made a lot of difference, a lot of input. It was really important for me because I was hanging out with Nobel laureates, in Cambridge. And they were emotionally dummies, honestly. They had no idea about sort of relating to anybody else, on the most part. And these guys over here, those were the professors, and the people who were supposed to have Down syndrome. I learned so much from them, and I enjoyed it so much. And it just showed me, just like many people say, you go out and do some community service, you think you're giving, ha ha ha. You are getting much more than you ever give when you come and just help out at a place like this, or another church, or another charity, or just go and help out. You get so much back, and that's the best cure for any depression, doing some community service. You become worthwhile. Your life has meaning. It's not just going out and getting your job and just getting the money and coming back to your family. You're giving out much more. And that's one of the reasons why. That's one of the best ways to overcome the depressions. So when you actually do that, you never get to the point of feeling that you're really so down that you need to sort of go and end your life. Life has a point. Life has a meaning. And eventually, if you come to a place like this, you understand what the meaning is. The meaning is making mistakes, forgiving them and learning. The AFL code. Acknowledge your mistakes, forgive them, no punishment, and learn from it. And that's why we grow. Unfortunately, in our life, we make a mistake, we hide it because we're embarrassed. There's nothing embarrassing about making a mistake. Where do we get that idea from? We're not allowed to make a mistake. You're not allowed to snore during the meditation. You're not allowed to have your mobile phone go off. And of course, every now and again, for the best will in the world, you think you've turned it off, and you press the wrong button and it goes off. Sometimes even the president, their phone goes off or whatever happens. This is life. And what I was taught, when somebody makes a mistake like that, people burst out laughing. Whenever I made a stupid mistake, my teacher, Ajahn Brahm, would never scold me. He would laugh. He'd think it's so funny. These so-called smart Westerners going to big universities become so stupid. Like the first time you meet an Asian toilet. I've never seen an Asian toilet before. What do I do it? So you sit right down on it. The first time, if those who've been to Asia, the little machine which you use to, to wash your bottom afterwards, this is in Thailand, and most of the toilets have it there. You press a little button and some water comes out. I thought, that's wonderful, brushing my teeth. It's actually a very good idea. You can go to the toilet, brush your teeth at the same time. So you make silly mistakes like that. People laugh at it. You don't get sort of upset about it. So what you're doing here, you're not judging yourself. You can know without judging, like I said at the end of the meditation. What a beautiful thing that is. You know life, you know your emotions, but you don't judge. It's just depression, that's all. It's a feeling. It's elation, it's anger, it's being grumpy. For goodness sake, give yourself a grumpy license. And then you find it doesn't last that long. You don't sort of get into the big rut, which sometimes causes people to commit suicide. But if they do that, then again, it's a big mistake, but acknowledge it, forgive it, learn from it. One of the things, when somebody makes a mistake, we take on the blame. I'm a teacher now. If you make mistakes, I am not going to worry about it at all. Don't blame me, your teacher. But Ajahn Brahm, you said. No, I suggested, I didn't say. But why is it that people take the blame? What their kids do? What your partner did? And, after a while, you see, this is one of the things with suicide, because I've been talking with a lot of people, counselling them, getting them through the suicide. These are not the people who committed suicide, these are the relations, the loved ones. All the time they keep on saying, I could have done something more. And I've listened to so many of them, and they're really good people. I've known them for a long time. You could not have done anything more. You couldn't have stopped it. This thing is part of life. Like, it'd be great, could we have stopped the bushfires? We try to limit it, but there'll always be bushfires. It's part of the nature of this state. Can we stop making mistakes? We try to, but you'll always make mistakes. So even though we try to stop these things, but we know that sometimes we just can't. It is part of life, that people will end their lives. So we take away the guilt and the blame game. I don't know why people keep blaming people. I'm not a great fan of Tony Abbott, but blaming him, I really feel compassion for him this week. He's done his best. And honestly, could any of you do better? Not me, anyway. It's just such a tough job. We just raise the thing so high. The other thing with depression, because somebody asked me this at the Cancer Wellness Association, the Cancer Day yesterday, and they said, how can we just overcome this this anger and blaming? A very simple thing: lower your expectations. We have such high expectations of ourselves and of others, which is one of the reasons we can't get relationships. Your expectations of your partner are far too high. Lower your expectations, you'll have a much happier relationship. If you lower your expectations right to the very bottom, you'll be ecstatic. Everything is a wonderful surprise. Wow, you brushed your teeth today. Wow. You can see, but especially of yourself. Now, what expectations have you got of yourself? I lowered my expectations to the very bottom a long time ago, especially my jokes. Okay, I haven't told the joke yet. So, did I tell the foot joke last week? Okay, now this is, please lower your expectations, because this is a very, very bad joke. And it does, relate to concern indigenous community, but this has nothing to do with, bagging indigenous community. Respect them a lot, original owners of the country, and just great culture. But the story was of a mother up north somewhere who had 3 sons, and she named her first son Foot, her second son Foot, and her third son Foot. So the 3 sons, they grew up together, foot. They went to school together, played together, went out bush together. And when Foot, became 18, he asked his mum, "Mum, I've been out of the bush all my life. I've never been to Perth. Can I go to Perth?" Mum said, "No, it's dangerous down there. You don't know what's going on down there." "Mum, I'll take my younger brother, Foot. So with Foot and Foot, we can come to Perth. We'll have a really good time." And Mother said, "Oh, okay, I suppose, you've got to sort of spread your wings and find out, what the white fellas do." So Foot got on the bus, and after a while they arrived in Perth, and Foot got out the bus, and they were walking down the road outside the bus station. They saw a half-eaten hamburger just cast aside on the ground. And Foot said, "Oh, it's bush tucker." And he picked it up, and Foot said, "No, you can't eat that. I don't know what it is. I better eat it first. I'm your elder brother." So Foot took the hamburger off Foot and ate it. And of course, it had been there a long time. It was dirty, had bacteria, and poor old Foot got an infection. And so Foot took him to Royal Perth Hospital, and they looked after Foot, and Foot was on the job trying to get the best for Foot. Unfortunately, it was such a bad sort of infection that poor old Foot died. And so Foot had to take his younger brother, deceased brother Foot, back up to the north, and they did the ceremony, and they were all sort of very grief-stricken that poor old Foot had died. And then after the grieving period was over, the younger brother Foot said, "Mum, I only had about 10 minutes in Perth, spent most of the time in the hospital. Can I go back there?" And Mum said, "Of course you can't go back. Mum, I'll take my younger brother Foot. So with Foot and Foot, we can have a nice time." And I said, "No, of course you can't go." "Why not, Mum?" And here's the terrible punchline. "Because, son, I have 1 foot in the grave already." I told you to lower your expectations down to the bottom. I do sorry about that. But what I found is that people complain about my jokes, and then they go and tell all the people they work with on Monday. They inflict the pain on others. But anyway, so when you lower your expectations, you don't get disappointed. And you don't get depressed, okay? So we have such high expectations, we judge ourselves far too harshly. We judge others far too harshly. That's one of the reasons why we get depressed. So, okay, someone committed suicide. Please don't judge them. Don't judge them so harshly. Why they did that, I don't know. Don't judge yourself. You could not have stopped it. And there's one of the suicides I went to, there's a Buddhist couple, they were in Roldestone several years ago. Their son committed suicide in primary school, about 10 or 11 years old, I think. And I knew the people in the school, and the principal, the teacher, the friends, they couldn't understand it. He was a very popular little boy, doing well at school, hadn't sort of had any breakup with anybody. No one could have known. And it was such an obvious case there that why these things happen, I don't know. No one knows. But sometimes they happen. And the point was that no one could be blamed. Really good school, good teachers, caring family, an excellent family. And why did it happen? Sometimes it happens. The point was no one could be blamed. So if that ever happens to you, don't think, it was my fault. I could have said something. I could have done something. No, you could not have. That's the thing I've learned by talking to a lot of people who have relations who have committed suicide. They think, what could I have done? And the answer, please, have some confidence and faith in me. And I know what I'm talking about. Nothing. These things sometimes happen. But what we can do, once it's happened, is learn from it. When we go into the past, sometimes we say, if I would have done that, if I would have done something else. You may have heard me say, the past is ineffable. There's a word in religion called ineffable, usually to God or Nibbana or some ultimate reality. The ultimate reality is ineffable, whatever that means. But instead of using a word which doesn't have much of a meaning, change it to ineffable. You cannot if the past. If I hadn't married that God, I married somebody else, I'd have been okay. Why did I do that? If I'd applied for another job, if I'd have locked my car, if. You can't if the past. It's happened, so you just have to let it go and move on into the future. The past can't be ifed. It is inifable. So especially that someone's committed suicide, don't if the past. You're wasting time. We learn. One of the things we learn is if it's a suicide or it's an accident, a heart attack or whatever, our life is short. The first thing we learn is to value our life. And by valuing it, I mean not just squeeze as much pleasure out of it as you possibly can while you're still alive, but squeeze as much meaning out of it, as much love, as much care, much forgiveness, the beautiful things in life. Squeeze as much wisdom and compassion as you can out of your short life here. It's a wonderful thing. Which means that, when the life is over, wow, what a great person that was. And we've affected each other, we've learned from each other, we've grown with each other. What a wonderful time we've spent. That's a beautiful thing we have with the meaning of life. And so when a person's life is cut short for any reason, it has meaning. When we look at a person's life, especially if they just committed suicide, why is it we just focus on the way they died? We forget the way they lived. Their death is just a tiny fraction of their whole life. But because the nature of the death, suicide, that takes precedence over every other thing they did in their life. So when you actually look at a person, remember them. Don't remember just the way they died. Also remember the way they lived. And then their death, even if it's a bad death, is just like the 2 bad bricks in the wall. That story, which I keep repeating because that's one of the other key stories, as well as the anger-eating monster, which really helps people. Building a wall in Serpentine, first wall, made 2 bricks, 2 mistakes, they were crooked, they spoiled the whole wall. I wanted to destroy the wall because those 2 bad bricks. I thought it was an ugly wall. I had nightmares about that wall, waking up, oh God, I made a big mistake. I wanted to sort of get some dynamite to blow it up, but we couldn't afford it. I was so embarrassed of my mistakes. Those 2 bricks spoiled the whole wall until somebody came along. I'm telling it quickly because you've heard this many times. Somebody came along and said, "What a beautiful wall." I said, "Are you blind? Can you not see the 2 bad bricks?" And they said, "Yes, I can see the 2 crooked bricks, but I can also see the 998 good bricks as well." It was me who was blind. Because I'd made that wall because I was so upset, all I could ever see was my 2 mistakes. I was literally blind to those 998 good bricks. How many times does that happen to you? Somebody commits suicide. All we see is those 1 bad brick. It's a very bad brick. We don't encourage suicide at all in Buddhism or any part of life. Well, why is it we just look at that 1 bad brick and that makes us so unhappy? Instead of seeing all the other days of their life, all the long time of kindness, all the beautiful bricks in the wall of a human being, and not just the way they ended their life. When you understand the 2 bad bricks simile, you understand you can still have a beautiful wall, even with a couple of crooked ones. They were a beautiful person. You were lucky to have known them. Thank you for being here. You made a mistake, but we all make mistakes. It's a bad mistake, it's hurt me, but thank you for all the wonderful times we've shared in our long life together. And as for the person who has committed suicide, please don't go along saying, oh, it's a sin. We don't have sins in Buddhism, okay? That's Catholic Christian stuff. We don't have sins, we have mistakes. And mistakes are forgiven, not punished. So don't think, oh my goodness, for those, please excuse me, I'm going to mention this, that some Buddhist monks, and I don't mind saying, they're ill-informed. I was going to say stupid, but I better not say that. I have. They go along and say, oh, that person's committed suicide, they're going to go to hell. And that's a mean thing to say, and it's also wrong. You don't go to hell for committing suicide or get a bad rebirth. In the same way, I don't know if they're here this evening, but a family, their young kid committed suicide. They were just about to do the Year 12 exams. And that's what they were told by someone. Oh my goodness, it's bad enough losing your son, but people telling you that they're going to go to hell? And I said, look, in Year 12, how many subjects do you do? I may get this wrong, it's a while now. They said about 4. How many exams in each subject? 2. How many papers are in each subject? So that's 8 exams your son's going to do. How many questions in each paper? I don't know, maybe 10? So he's about to do 80 questions to get to university. Imagine, I said, 79 of those questions, they answer perfectly correct. And the last question, they really make a mess of. 79 out of 80, would they get to university? They'd probably get a scholarship or somewhere, 79 out of 80. They'd certainly get to UWA. You won't get... 79 out of 80, is that right? I don't know, anyway. You don't get, sent to, to work in the, on the rubbish bins or whatever. But 79 out of 80 is a good score. So, a life. 79 questions perfectly answered, and now you commit suicide. The last question of your life, you stuff up. That doesn't mean you go to hell. You can't just judge a person's life by the way it's ended. What about all the other stuff they've done in the rest of their life? When you look at the whole life, not just the last moment of it, how they died, of course they don't go to hell. If they've been a BASTARD all their life, fair enough. I don't care how they died, they're going to get a bad rebirth. But just looking at one act, one bad brick, doesn't make a bad wall. So that's why, please don't judge a person just on the way they died. Good person. We learn from it, we grow from it, we take the love we've shared with them forward in our life. We let it go. And we make sure that when, we can learn from this, when people get a bit depressed, get them to come to a place like this. Go and take them to an old people's home. Get them to do some service for others. My goodness, people need help in our modern world. Government is always cutting back and cutting back and cutting back. And just which means that, there's not enough people to help out. Just, visiting lonely people in old people's homes. Old people who no one ever visits them. You visit them. People, kids, orphans. Just people with disabilities. Take them out, look after them. If more people did that, there'd be far less depression and a much more beautiful world. So that's how we can deal with these things. So that is a little talk today about dealing with suicide in Buddhism. So please, I hope you enjoyed that, but please don't do it. There's many more options instead. Thank you for listening. Very good. That's another way. Remember, we'll do that again. There's 3 sadhus because, sometimes people... I used to go to churches and I get really bored or frightened. I used to go to Buddhist talks when I was at university and fall asleep. There's no energy in there. So when we do 3 sadhus, give it everything you've got. Now, please follow me. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Now that cures depression straight away. Okay, let's get some comments here. Okay, some questions here. Very good. Only one. No, 2. Wow. First question. Guess from where? From Syria. Ooh. What is the origin of all bad feelings? Being born. When you are born, you will have some bad feelings, you'll have some good feelings. So, take bad feelings just like the weather. Sometimes we have the storms, sometimes we have the sunny weather. So when you actually don't judge bad feelings, don't call them bad, they're just feelings, which are just a bit hard to take, you'll find they won't last that long. They will change, and you'll have some good feelings as well. Don't obsess with the bad feelings like I obsessed with the bad bricks in the wall. there are other feelings right before and right after the bad feelings. Even I remember reading some excerpts of people who were in Auschwitz. They had an anniversary of its liberation just a few weeks ago. Even though it was a disgusting, terrible place to stay, they find time to share jokes and laugh. When I first read that, I thought, wow, that's incredible. That you always find in any place, there's always the opportunity. And that's a terrible place. Syria's not that hot at the moment, but the origin of bad feelings, you can still have love, respect, even laughter in the most amazing places. So origin of all bad feelings is life, but please remember, it's not all bad feelings. It's not all bad bricks. There's some beautiful bricks in there. Have a look. Don't be blind, and you'll see them. Next one, from USA. I have been suicidal almost all my life since childhood. Recently, I feel worse and useless. I mentally comprehend that I'm a damaged tree, but cannot emotionally shake that feeling off. What should I do? One thing, keep on listening to these talks, and do stupid sadhus or whatever, because after a while, from United States, if you keep listening to this, I will brainwash you. I will get into your head. And eventually you will believe that damaged trees are beautiful. Now, the crooked trees in the forest, which I keep on saying, they're the most beautiful in the whole world. And if you feel worse and useless, amazing. There's no such person in the world who is actually useless. And a person from USA, whoever you are, whatever you are, now you'll find that when you've embraced that feeling of uselessness, embrace it, don't try and get rid of it. Really get it inside of you. Know it. Don't try and shake it off. Know it. And when you know it, you'll be free from it. It's the knowledge gives you that freedom, not the getting rid of it. Please remember the monster in the Emperor's Palace. Remember, like Mara. I know you, Mara. I know that feeling. It's not me. That feeling just comes and goes, and other feelings will come. So you know it. So don't try to shake it off. Embrace it, get to know it, and then you'll be free. Okay. And there was another question which somebody asked me on the email, and they said, can't do a talk on it, can you please mention this? An Asian person, a young person, how can I find a good partner in my life? Because my parents keep on saying that your choices are no good. But I like those boys. And the ones they choose for me are hopeless. So in Asia, sometimes what it's like, even in Australia, sometimes your mums and dads keep pushing you, and this is a nice boy, go. And say, but I don't like him. So, one of the nice things in our modern world, please excuse me for saying this, is not traditional, is, before you buy a car, you give it a test drive. Before you commit. I think you know what I mean. And that is quite helpful. Because you don't know a person by going out with them. When you go out with somebody, they're always on the best behavior, you're not really truthful. Women wear all the makeup, you're not being truthful what you really look like. And boys, just being really, really nice. So when you actually, you wake up with a person, and when you actually, you see them when they go to the toilet, and when they're in a bad mood, that's when you really get to know somebody. So sometimes, you just have to spend a lot of time with a person before, you can even start getting to know them. So that's why, modern world, just the test driving and just hanging out together and just, living together for a few weeks or whatever. Unfortunately, you may think that's wrong, but, that saves a lot of problems. When a person, they just, make a wrong choice. And how can you really know what the person is like? You've been out with them a few times. And then you find out you're committing to each other. You don't know what the hell you're committing to. So sometimes it is a bit of trying and testing, first of all, seeing what they're like. That's the only way you really know. Mothers and fathers with the best will in the world, sometimes they may have a bit more experience, who's a good guy, who's a good girl, but sometimes they get it wrong too. And sometimes, you get it wrong as a young girl, a young boy. trying to find out, what the person is like. Sometimes I tell, do some research. If you're going out with a boy, ask the other girls, ask the boys, what's he like? What's he done before? Do some research. Just like if you are buying a new car, you don't just believe what the salesman says. You get on the internet, do the research, ask your friends, this Mazda 3, have you got one of those? What's it like? When you do the research, it's amazing what you find out. If you ask, the boy's ex-girlfriends, what was he like? Oh, don't go out with him. And there's, simple things like, you get from a monk who knows all about these things. And the same with the mum and dad. Sometimes, if your child really, really, really wants to go out with somebody, please let them. Yeah, it may hurt them, but, kids need to learn. They need to be hurt. And something I've said to many young girls, you do need to have your heart broken before you know what love is. It's not an easy path. So yeah, you're going to cry, you're going to really feel so terrible. But that's part of the path. So, get out there and just live life. Cry a lot, laugh a lot, and love a lot, and see what happens. And with a bit of luck, one of the best places, if you want to find a nice guy, is our Kalyana Mitta group. Because all the girls and boys that go to our Kalyana Mitta group, this is our youth group, they get Ajahn Brahm's stamp of approval. It's like getting a car guaranteed by really good people. So, but if you go to a nightclub and stuff like that, what are you going to get in a nightclub? What sort of people hang out in nightclubs? There's some good people, but chances are, you go into a dodgy car salesman in a nightclub. So you'll be lucky if you get a bargain. So anyway, that's a little bit of advice for the person who asked me that sort of. And mothers and fathers, in this country, they respect me. Just let them listen to what I said, because sometimes the mothers and fathers in Asian countries, they don't listen to their children. But a monk said this, Ajahn Brahm said this, and they take it seriously, and that will help their kid, get a much better choice in life of a partner. Okay, so thank you again for all listening. I've gone over time again. Please apologise, but there's no extra charge. So we can now pay respects to Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. If you've got another question, you're most welcome to come up and ask personally.